Alrighty, guys and gals, good morning. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope all of y'all that are in down south, Alabama way, Georgia way, or Florida way are doing okay with weather because it is an absolute barn burner down here weather-wise. Glad all of y'all are joining us. I already see a good influx of people watching. Mr. Terry from CCC, Jason, Rebel Rouser, and Mary Jo. Glad to have y'all. I'm very excited about this show today, guys, because we are going to be joined by our second Air America pilot. But today we're breaking new ground in the Air America history and story because we are joined by one of history-wise, I can't tell, but he served a very, very long time in Air America, and thank goodness, he wrote a book about his service, or actually his entire life, to be quite frank. But the majority of his book is his service with Air America, is flying fixed wings, and he flies a variety of aircraft throughout his time, and he'll get into it starting at a very, very young age, and all kinds of hijinks in this book, fun stuff, sadly some stuff that you expect in war, losing friends, losing comrades, but it's an absolute page turner. I got it late for the interview and sat down and could not stop, and pretty much finished it this morning. So get out there. It's in the show notes. Please buy it. And without further ado, I'm going to let Mr. Neil start us off today. And by the way, he is a Captain Neil Graham Hansen. And I believe his co-author of his book, Miss Luann, is off camera. But I'm going to hand it off to him and let him get started for this morning. Good morning, Mr. Neil, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bud. I appreciate that. And we'll go back in time and start off from where I got interested in aviation. Prior to moving to Detroit, I lived up in northern Michigan, near Interlock, Michigan, in a house with no electricity, no central heat, of course, and no indoor plumbing.
Oof.
So you got used to going out in the snow in the wintertime. And also, we ate everything came off the trap line because your last trip into the town of Traverse City would be usually around in September. And then you wouldn't go again until April or so. And everything you had would be smoked, canned, or caught on the trap line or through the ice in the lake. And you get used to eating a lot of muskrat. It was quite good. But in latter years, my mother remarried and moved to Detroit. And that was a cultural experience for me. We would have a house with indoor plumbing, running water, and all of those accoutrements that you have in the city. And there was one other thing that was there, was City Airport in downtown Detroit. I had the urge to fool with airplanes and things like that for many, many years as a child. I'd get the balsa models that you'd carve out of blocks of balsa wood. And then when I got down there to Detroit, you could get gasoline-powered, U-controlled aircraft and free flight stuff. But the biggest appeal to me was pedaling my bicycle out of Detroit City Airport. Once there, the GI Bill from World War II was still going on, and I could wash J3 Cubs that were being used for trainers. I could do 3 of those an hour at $5 a piece, which was cash money. That was fueled my bank account to get flying lessons, because back then, a dual instruction in a Luscombe 80E was only $14 an hour.
Wow.
Which that has changed radically over the years. But got that, and I ended up getting my commercial pilot's license before I graduated from high school. And before I graduated from high school, I'd bought an airplane. I bought a Cessna 120 up in Cadillac, Michigan for $1,300 that I'd saved up, and spent the whole summer living in that airplane and going from airport to airport, because avgas back then was only 30 cents a gallon. And you could afford to do that sort of thing. Even the insurance on that airplane for a kid 17 years old was only $26 a year. And that airplane I traded in for a Mooney Mite, a little single place wooden airplane with retractable gear. And I'd been friends with another pilot that was out there at City Airport. He'd had a flight school. His name was Neil Loving. He was a black man, and he had built a Goodyear racer. But prior to that, he'd had an accident with an airplane he had and chopped off his legs. So he had artificial legs. The J3 Cub that he'd instruct in, he could accomplish that because it had heel brakes on the thing, not toe brakes. And he had a flight school and he was teaching people how to fly. And he also flew this Goodyear racer down to Kingston, Jamaica. And that kind of fueled my interest to do it. And I did the same thing with that Mooney Mite. 65 horsepower engine, 11 gallons of gas behind your head, and many stops en route to get down to Kingston, Jamaica. But it was an experience, and I'm amazed, really, in some ways, that my mother allowed me to do that. But I think she just knew that I had the wild in me, and I was going to do whatever it took to get more experience as far as the adrenaline injection that you needed. But at the end of high school, I joined the Air Force as a helicopter mechanic and spent 4 years doing that. But the Air Force was a lot of fun. I almost went to officer training school, except you had about an 8-year obligation. And I wanted to get back to flying because I could see that the military guys were not getting the flight time that I wanted. And I was getting more than they were because I was flight instructing with the Base Aero Club.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
We had a T-34 as a bird that was available at the Base Aero Club. And that was only $4.50 an hour wet. And that was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with that thing. But also at the end, I was in Stead Air Force Base near Reno, Nevada, and I hooked up with a flight school down there and started teaching people to fly down there. Also got my multi-engine rating and my instrument rating down there at that time. And this was great, but the Reno area was not my cup of tea. So I went back to Detroit, and back in Detroit, went through the chartered stuff and flight in schools, and ended up flying a 680 Commander down there for Centus Aero, which was a lot of fun. But as everything in aviation goes, things slow down and you tend to get furloughed on some stuff. Well, an opening came up for a Conrad 9800 Twin Beach for the Teamsters Union.
Mm-hmm.
And I began flying for the Teamsters Union. One of my first overnight trips ended up, I was gone for 2 months. I had a mechanic co-pilot, which was good. But Conrad 9800 Beach was a modified twin beach, and it was fast. It was much faster than the normal twin beaches of the day. But our overnight trips were unreliable as far as coming home. But one good thing about flying with the Teamsters Union, if you needed clothes or anything else, just put it on the tab and they would pay for it. After several months down in Chattanooga, Tennessee, on trial for bribery with Jimmy, and it looked like he was going to go on a federal vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when that happened, in most aviation, executive aviation jobs, they let you go too because you were privy to their travel, their contacts, and they didn't want any cross-pollination of information there. Well, the Teamsters had a building in Washington, D.C., right on Capitol Square.
That's right.
I got a copy of the Washington Post and looked in there, and by gosh, there was a job advertised in Southeast Asia. And so I called them up, and they sent me an application. Okay, it was a stock application, nothing unique about it. And I filled it out and fired it back to their personnel guy in H.H. Dawson, and didn't hear anything. And next trip into D.C., I gave him a call. And he was really gruff. And he says, oh, Captain Hansen, we're not hiring right now. Okay, that looks like a dead horse. I better look other places. But 3 days after that, I was in Chicago Lakefront Airport, Meigs Field there, and which is now gone. It's been devoured by the city. But I got a call to come to the airport manager's office. And when I got in there, they said, on hold for a call from Mr. Dawson. Okay. And when he did come on the line, he was all happy and said, Captain Hansen, you still interested in working for us? Yeah, sure. He said, I got a couple questions for you. Can you fly good? And I was tempted to say, oh, no, the wreckage is still burning. But he says, one other question. Do you drink a lot? Well, maybe this is a requirement. But I said, no, sir. And he says, well, can you go in 10 days? And I said, go where? He says, oh, you're hired. And I says, well, I need to get a passport and things. And he says, oh, yeah, get a passport. And then I'd like to have 2 weeks to give my employer proper notice. And he said, okay, that'll be fine. And so I went back to Detroit and filled out the application, gave him the pictures down at the passport office. And I said, well, when will I get the passport? And he said, well, it'll be 30 to 45 days.
Oh.
I'm supposed to report to work overseas here in 2 weeks. And they said, well, who are you working for? And I said, Air America. And I had the passport in 4 days, which kind of gave you a clue that something funny is going on in the back room. And on one of the last trips with a load of lawyers on board, and the co-pilot was back serving drinks, and one of them came up to the cockpit and, "Who are you leaving us?" And I says, "Yeah, I'm going to work for a company called Air America overseas." And he laughed and he said, "Oh yeah, that's the CIA." And of course, I had great visions of Terry and the Pirates and the comic strip, and also the new James Bond novels that were coming out, which were interesting, but reality is far, far from the scenarios in these fictionalized books. But we launched out of Detroit, and first stop after getting overseas was Taipei in Taiwan, Formosa at that time, and down to the head office. Head office was all Chinese calligraphy and gold dragons and things. And boy, this is kind of impressive. And met the chief pilot, Don Teeters, and one of the vice presidents. And then you had to go take a Chinese physical. Well, you're in China. And so you're going to have to get a Chinese pilot's license. Well, I thought that was okay. Some of the guys would poo-poo that, but I took it seriously. We're in their country. Their airplanes are all Chinese registry. So you better get something that is common to the scenario here. And I went and took their written seriously. And I had a young gal behind the desk there in the hotel I was staying at coach me on what the etiquette is on that. And she says, dress up like you're going to a formal affair, sit right in front of them, and don't hide in the back of the room. And I did that. And I asked for the airline transport rating test. And nobody had passed it for about a year and a half. And I sat there and I filled it all out and said, there's another important thing you do. When you take the test from the examiner, take it with both hands, showing respect. And when you turn it back in, hand it in with both hands. It shows you still showing respect for the test. I did, and I passed it, which had been the first one in about 18 months I ever passed the thing. But rather than go to Southeast Asia, as I was hoping, they sent me to Tachikawa, Japan. I found through the grapevine that this company is a spider web of companies. You had Air America, you had Civil Air Transport, which was a Chinese flag carrier. You had Southern Air Transport Pacific Division. You had Air Asia, which is a huge maintenance facility, and Arizona Helicopters, for some reason, was involved in that. Well, up in Tachikawa, checked out in DC-6, which we were hauling Stars and Stripes newspapers and troops from Tachikawa, Japan, down to Okinawa, to the Philippines, Clark Air Force Base, to Bangkok, and also into Saigon. But on occasion, they take this DC-6 and pull it over to the other side of the field, strip off all the markings. So you didn't have anything but a bare aluminum airplane, nothing's in English or identifying nationality on the airplane. And we come out at 2:00 in the morning, and in operations, you'd leave all your identification and get into this DC-6 loaded with high explosives, claymore mines, things like that, and fly it 10 hours down into Southeast Asia, maintaining radio silence the whole way. You fly 500 feet off normal airline altitudes, so you didn't make a big bang en route somewhere. And offload down there, turn around and come back the same way. And the only radio contact you'd make is when you're about 15 miles out of Kadena in Okinawa. Give them a call and they'd clear you to land. They'd tow it over to the other side of the field, paint everything back on it, and okay, and back on the schedule again. Well, this was fine, but I wanted to go down to where the interesting flying was. Since I'd passed my airline transport rating for Chinese license and FAA license airline transport, I bugged them and I took a flight test there in Tachikawa, Japan, and an old C-46. Got both of those tickets under my belt and told them, well, how about now go south? And they relented, and I went down to Saigon. And this was now stepping into the frying pan. 1964. Things are just beginning to build up down there. Nobody knew what was going on and what the dangers were. At the time I got there, we had 10 C-45s, Twin Beaches, and 10 pilots. So I was on the line as a captain in about 4 days, still learning the country. And a couple months after that, they made me an instructor pilot, checking out new people. And that was a chapter in the book. I dealt with these guys roughly. Here they are, they're coming into a war zone, living in the local economy and having all the associated problems there. And many of the guys, they thought that, hey, we pull into a little strip like this, we need gas and stuff. Somebody will come out and do that. No, nobody's going to come out and do that for you. You're going to have to get out on that wing with a 5-gallon jerry can of oil and everything else and refuel your own bird, usually out of barrels with a hand pump. And some of them didn't like that particular thing, so they decided to go home. Okay, that's your decision, and I'm glad you did it. Luckily, we had quite a bunch of guys came out of civilian aviation in America, many of them out of agricultural aviation, and they had all of these same things they had to do in that job. So this was nothing new to them, and they were good. But some of the new guys that came in, I gave them an awful hard time. I would do things in the cockpit to test their mettle. I wanted to see if they give up. If they give up, go home. If you keep trying to survive, even if you're doing it wrong, that's better than nothing. And I could accept that. And some of them did quit. One classic guy I had was Roger Vickery, and he was an excellent pilot, rather slovenly, but a good throttle bender. And we got along well. In that fall of 1965, they made me assistant manager flying. And assistant manager flying gave me a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week job with a radio by my bed so they could call me out at any time of the day or night. to correct scheduling problems or other problems that were involved. I was in charge of sometimes the Twin Beach program, Volpar program, which was a turbine Twin Beach, and Dornier 28, German airplane, and the C-46 program, which Dumbo is one of my favorite birds. And occasionally I'd get a chance to play with a DC-3, which is a fun airplane, but C-46 weighs more empty than the DC-3 does fully loaded. And C-46 was my real joy. It was a great airplane. The only thing we had different from the American version of the C-46 was that we had the Chinese registered ones, and we had Curtiss Electric props on them. Curtiss Electric props had been banned in America and had three-bladed Hamilton standard props, mainly because without good maintenance, the Curtiss Electric prop would run away, go into flat pitch, and be like a big plate out there, and overspeed the engine and perhaps tear the engine from its mounts and or the wing with it. So that was not a good thing. I only had one runaway with that up in Dalat in central highlands of Vietnam, and spent the night up there with a old Chinese fellow retired from Hong Kong. And that's where I ended up with a little exotic food. He took us over to his house and spent the night there. The next morning, I could hear a yelp of a dog outside, and came down. We had some stew, and asked him, "Grandfather, what kind of meat you have? It's very good." And he said, "Dog." And it was okay. Never mind. Growing up on a rural Michigan farm type thing, it was not shocking or regurgitating. But number of years in Vietnam, monitoring and being a big babysitter for these pilots as assistant manager flying, and not really having hardly any time off, was wearing. And I wanted to go back to the line, just fly an airplane and have a crew that's all I have to worry about. And I ended up more or less giving them an ultimatum that, oh, I'd like to go to Vientiane, Laos and fly up there. A lot of people don't realize Laos was pretty much where the real war was. There were more bombs dropped in Laos than all of World War II, most bombed country in the world. Another thing that they had up there too was we were supporting the Hmong people. The Hmong were fiercely loyal to us, and we had brought them out of agricultural existence into a wartime existence and perhaps into this century. They'd been taken down to various camps in Thailand and trained down there. One of them was Pitsanulok, and that's where Tony Poe, who had left Laos, was down there training. And some of the training methods I really had a problem with. One load of troops I took off out of Pitsanulok, bringing them up into Laos. One of the load masters came up front and said, "Captain, come back. I want you to see." And we had a bunch of troops sitting on the sides in the canvas seats, and they were passing a hand grenade between each other with a pin pulled. Well, this was a test that they had during training to test their mettle, I guess. But I took it away from him, threw it out the door, and asked the loadmaster to confiscate all the damn grenades and get them away from him. But, I also had the displeasure of picking up some of the guys on this that played this game and had than one that they'd done in a bunker. And when the spoon came off the grenade and ignited the fuse, they had no place to run. And, they were badly wounded. And I think I described some of that in one of the chapters of the book. Took off out of alternate, bringing them to a hospital in Thailand. And most of them died en route. And left their spirits in the sky. But Laos was a wonderful place for me. We had a regular schedule up there, so you had time off, which was something that didn't have in Vietnam. But you could go to Hong Kong and various other places and get rid of your tension. And this was a wonderful thing to do. But Laos also had a lot of features that were unique to it. They had houses that I guess you could find companions in. One was the white rose, lulus, purple porpoise. And these places were well staffed with people that would cater to your needs. And were great watering holes, too. That was the other thing about Laos. The cost of living there was very low. Even though a neutral country in the midst of a war, Vientiane, Laos had everybody in it. The Red Chinese, the Communist Laotians, the North Vietnamese, the French were still there, which were leftovers from the French Indochina War, and the Corsicans were there. The Corsicans had two twin beaches out at the airport that were used for something I'm sure was illegal, flying out of there and airdropping to freighters in the Gulf of Siam, which would then take that product to Marseille and then onward to New York City or wherever. But that was not part of our thing. The mountain tribes for centuries had been growing poppies, and they were the opium poppies, and the black tears from those they could sell down the market and they'd go overseas. But a kilo of these tears in the market in Vientiane was $30-some. That same kilo is going up to $250,000 in New York City. The economics of that was irrefutable. And it was not illegal in Laos. There were no laws against it. It was wide open. But you didn't see addicts stumbling down the street. Primarily, the black tears were used for the elderly and infirm, and they'd be allowed to smoke those tears and just have a happy dream in their dotage. And when things got really bad, if they just swallowed one of those tears, they'd go out in a dream, which I thought was a fine thing to do. It's something that I guess is now practiced somewhere else. Dr. Kevorkian ought to do stuff like that. But those are social failings that we don't really address, and we should. There's many, many things in our culture that don't consider mercy, and it's a shame. But Laos, now in the 1970s, is warming up. Laos had a lot of unique things. In central Laos, there was an area called the Plain de Jars, and these jars had come from a long ways away, or the stone had, and then carved out in this plain. Now, what the purpose of them was, hardly anybody has a definitive answer for that. They thought it was burial urns, but some of the jars that they looked in, they didn't find any bones or anything. Of course, bones can be chewed up by the local vermin, and they're gone. But these jars were kind of a mystery. And the plain of jars was controlled by the enemy. The enemy had anti-aircraft weapons there. We had drop sites to the north of that, and we'd always go around the plain de jars. And if you went up there in twilight and the rest of that, that whole sky would sparkle for you, and with the anti-aircraft fire. Had a site just to the north of that called Site 32. The case officer there was Black Lion, and he was a black guy, but he kept the whole area clear, and except there was enemy positions all around it. One of our C-46s got shot down there with the loss of the whole crew.
God.
One thing with airdropping that I did that many of the others did not do is if we're on an airdrop, everybody's going to wear a parachute. I don't care how uncomfortable it is. If you need it, you don't have time to go down to the cabin and put it on. You're going to wear it. And if things go south on you, hey, you got a way out. You can live. Without that, you're not going to live. Of course, the loadmasters in the back, they always wore parachutes because they're working by an open ramp with a 120 mile an hour wind blowing through there off the edge of the ramp, and cargo that some of the pallets would be 1,200 pounds on ready, willing to pinch off a hand, finger, or foot. So it was quite a balancing act, and they had back there. Our loadmasters, we had Americans. Gene Hansen was one of them. There was a number of them, and they were good guys. But I actually leaned more towards the Thai kickers we had and Laotian kickers. They were better about following orders, and one senior guy there who'd been in the Thai Special Forces, Sampop, he was really good. And we had a lot in common there, and we always kidded each other and the rest of that. But they followed orders exactly as you told them. And that was a wonderful thing. Gene, of course, was there on airdrops, and he had the displeasure of picking up body parts of crashes and things like that. And he had some awful experiences. We had one we called Bullet. I was flying up near the plain de jars, and there was a bang in the back. And a call over the intercom, I'm hit. And sent the co-pilot back, and he came back laughing. And I said, what the hell's funny? He says, well, the round went in the hydraulic tank behind him. The red hydraulic fluid was spraying on his back. Hot. He thought it was blood. But no, there was a lot of little things like that that were exciting, to say the least. And many of these loadmasters that we had that were American came from the stockpile of smoke jumpers around Missoula, Wisconsin, Montana. They were very well versed in parachutes and things like that because they were jumping into forest fires. An experience, and I think perhaps it was one of them that carried that a little bit too far when he came back to the United States. But those are things that are conjecture, not fact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
But as things warmed up and we started picking up more and more bullet holes, things were in the process of a peace accord talk in Paris. Well, we had a Hughes 500, Loach, as they called it in the military, with a quiet kit. And it was sent up to near Hanoi, and they tapped the phone lines. So Henry Kissinger had all the information that was coming out of Hanoi to their delegation in Paris and what they were negotiating for. And I don't know if anything ever was used of that. But those guys risked their lives going up there with that chopper with a quiet kit. and doing that.
Mm.
We, of course, had Bell 204s, choppers there, and we also had H-34s. The H-34s were really the donkeys of the whole helicopter operation up there, and they got shot up regularly, and so did the Hueys. One Huey, of course, made the news by doing the first air-to-air kill from a helicopter. It was up there by Site 36, and the North Vietnamese sent two AN-2 Colts, big Russian biplanes, down there with mortar bombs to bomb. Oh, that's the picture right there. Yeah, that's good. And the flight mechanic in the back didn't know what was going on, and he had an AK-47, so he pulled that out and he killed the pilot in the AN-2 Colt. So that was first air-to-air kill from a helicopter. And he got in a lot of trouble over that. We thought that by doing that, we'd open the door for them to come down and shoot us up with MiGs, but they didn't. They didn't want to escalate it, which I was kind of surprised at that. But that was quite a momentous occasion. My airdrops became a lot more risky, and as things were tightening up, there was rumors that we were going to be leaving Laos. This was not a happy thought for me. One of my last trips, I was tasked with going down with a 123 to Udorn, to a place called Pepper Grinder. It had various munitions, claymore mines, and high explosives that we would then take into a neutral country, which, according to the Geneva Convention, this was not a legal operation. They used to have funny signs as you pulled into this PSP ramp, doomsday card accepted here. All sorts of things like that. Well, I picked up a load there at Pepper Grinder and was tasked with going down to Pak Se in southern Laos, right on the edge of the Mekong River as it wanders down into Cambodia. And with the Ho Chi Minh Trail not too far away. And got down there, and the place where we'd stay, it's a house that was all sandbagged. Oh boy, why are you doing this? Well, we expect a mortar attack tonight. Oh, okay, that's nice. But next day, got up and chopper guys were heading out to the field first because they were going to go resupply one of the fire bases I was going to be dropping at. And my co-pilot had been an Air Force colonel, full bird colonel, not because of his time in service or aviation abilities, is because he had a PhD in etymology. Now, what the hell good that does, we couldn't figure out. People were harassing him about that, and I can't blame him. I did too. But bug science is not helpful in the war zone. Got out the airport and got a briefing. Two customers there was Gray Fox and Tall Man. And Tall Man, he was in charge of the sites I was going to drop at. And one thing you had to watch is these guys were in charge of those areas and responsible for what was happening there. So they might try to send you in there even if they knew it was bad, because they want their troops to get some resupplied. About 2 to 3 weeks before that, one of our caribous had been down there doing about the same thing and got shot down, and they were all killed in that crash. And so I take everything he was saying with a grain of salt. But the choppers were going to go into the sites I was going to drop at and pick up wounded. Well, that told me the bad guys are pretty close too. But I waited till they got off, and I got the crew on board, and Sampap Buma and Carruthers, my co-pilot. And we cranked up and climbed up on a low cloud deck, broken cloud deck, and listened to the choppers going in and out of these sites. Nobody's calling any ground fire. Well, that's not too bad. Well, as I got closer in, I asked the guys if they're clear of the first drop site, and there was nobody on the pad, and they all called clear. And I called the customer and told them to start throwing smoke grenades out there. And they did. I had a nice bubble of smoke coming up and came down, made 2 passes, and dropped 1 track of munitions into them. And the next site was only about 15 miles away. So I told him, hey, just leave it open in the back and keep the jets running. And we'll go over there, drop, and go home. And headed over to that. As I came up on the site, the customer on the ground called, Big Bird, get out of here, AAA, AAA.
Oh,
Now, AAA is anti-aircraft artillery. And it comes in a lot of different flavors, 50 caliber, 23 millimeter, that's an explosive round, 37 millimeter explosive round, and 57 millimeter. 50 caliber is normally a green tracer you'll see coming up. Bad guys use green tracers, which was nice, so we knew it wasn't friendly. But 23 millimeters white hot and really fast. 37 millimeter and 57 millimeter are red hot and look like red balls coming up. And I didn't see anything, but I started jinking and brought the jets up to 100% and the precips up and got the hell out of there. And I said, I didn't see anything. And Sound Pop came on the internet and said red balls went by the tail. Well, that means there's a big gun down there. And it's got to be almost right at the site, which is not a good thing. And back to Poksite. Once on the ground there, I told the tall man, that the customer there, hey, there's AAA there at that site. And he said, oh, no, there's no such thing in that area. I said, well, how about you go out and talk to my loadmasters? They saw it. Said, oh, no, if it makes you happy, we'll send a patrol out and they'll sweep the area. Okay. Well, about 45 minutes later, he came back. Oh, they swept the area. There was nothing there. I said, well, I'll go back. But, you got choppers going back in again. I want at least one of them to stand by in case I have a problem. And he says, okay, if that keeps you happy. And I said, yeah, it's going to keep you happy. And waited for the choppers to get off the ground and cranked up and did a big circle out over the Mekong and then followed behind them. Listen to them going in and out of the site. Nobody's taking any fire, but they're full of wounded. So that's not a good sign. When I got about 15 miles out, I dumped it right down to the top of the jungle canopy and told the guys in the back, open it up and get ready for a drop. I'm going to make one pass and that's it. And hang on the way out. And got within about a half a mile of the site and pulled up to drop 400 feet. And they nailed me. I initially lost the ailerons. Those are the things that make the wings bank. And part of the rudder, too. I had full right rudder, but it was rolling into the jungle to the left. So I pulled the power completely off the right side and idled the right jet. And it slowly came back, shaking like hell, and staggered away from there. And co-pilot, he was froze. I punched him, and he opened his eyes, and he was scared, and I can't blame him. But I told him, we're going to head for the old Japanese strip over here. It's all overgrown from World War II. And if we have to, we'll put it on the ground there, or we'll bail out there. Well, with the control problems I was having, and the fuel was going down rapidly out of that fuel tank, there's big holes in it. And the choppers had called and said, you're trailing fluid. Yeah. But I knew the tank was not going to blow up because it had been foamed. It had been foamed in there to keep it from having a combustible area. And I could see I'm not going to have enough fuel to get back. And I didn't know what's all under that elephant grass and an overgrown runway. So I told the guys, get in the back and we're going to go for a walk and let the choppers know. And first pass, I lined up and was about to ring the bell for them to go. And co-pilot's back in the cockpit. I said, what do you want, Bill? He wanted his survival vest. Okay. I let him have that, and he got out of the cockpit. And I told Sam Pop in the back, take it away from him and throw it out the door. If he tries to put it on, his parachute won't open. And I probably should have let him put it on, but I didn't. And lined up again. And he's back in the cockpit. And he wanted his camera. He'd bought a Nikon camera in Hong Kong, and he wanted to take that. Well, you can't hang on to it when you exit the airplane. You're going to get it ripped out of your hands. And that's how he got a cut on his forehead when I backhanded him. And he fell down the ladder in the cabin. I told him, I don't care what you do next time. Throw him out. I can't hang on to this thing much longer. And he got in the back, and Booma, the other tie kicker, he went when I rang the bell. When Bill leaned out the door to look, see what happened to him, Sampop took him out. Well, he'd never jumped, and he thought you do like in the movies, you come in and take the D-ring and go out like that. It doesn't work. It's in a metal conduit. It's a cable, and you want to take it and strip it right straight down towards your crotch, and then it'll pull the pins out nice and neat, and the chute will deploy. Well, it took him a while, and ruined his underwear in the process. But they called in 3 good chutes, and I told them, boy, hang on, I'll be out fast. And came around and lined it up, locked the controls, jumped down in the cabin, and hung on the static line so I didn't fall down, break a leg on the way back, and swung out the troop door on the right side. And watched her go away from me and try to get stable. I'd done skydiving before. And watched her go away, and then I pulled. And it was fairly high velocity, and that's how I lost an inch and a half in height. And when it opens, it's a really nasty with a standard wrap parachute. The canopy opens first, and then your lines come tight, and you're at the end of those lines. And so you better have your harness tight. But I still ended up with big strawberries in my shoulders from where it pinched me, and strawberries in your crotch area, because it's pretty violent opening. And ended up near a little clearing and chucked the chute, saved the ripcord, and went over there. And the chopper that came in, Bob Thoreau, and his co-pilot was an H-34. They pulled in, and he was going to try to land, and he damaged his tail rotor in the jungle, and pulled back up, and I rode the sling into the cabin. But it was shaking pretty bad because of the damage to the tail rotor. And we went down over by the old Japanese strip and shut down. Okay, this is good so far. And another chopper came in and landed a couple hundred meters away from us. Got over there, and we had to carry the wounded from his chopper over there. And why'd you do that? And he says, well, you guys are in a minefield. They couldn't have been very good mines. Nothing blew up. But loaded all the wounded in there, and he was full, so he took off. And they called for another chopper to come back in and get us. Well, we hunkered down in the elephant grass, and everybody scavenged an Uzi out of that chopper. That's a nice little weapon, 9mm Israeli
Uzi.
And you had 9mm rounds. You could carry 100 rounds real easy with that thing, and it'd make enough noise to keep bad guys away for a while. But finally, another chopper came in and got in that thing, and door was open, and I made a obscene gesture to the bad guys, and we got to the edge of the Plateau de Boulevards, and it's a high mesa, like out west, and dropped right down to the alluvion plain around the river. And as he got to the edge of that, he ran out of gas. So we're auto-rotating down towards a little village. Didn't know if it was good guys or bad guys, but there were kids and dogs out, so that was a good sign. But as we rounded out, putting it down on a rice paddy next to the village, one of our H-34s with the turbines came alongside, and he had gun mounts. And they gave me a ride the rest of the way. But you cannot drink enough after that. Your adrenaline level is so high. We got back. I still had the Uzi in my hand, and I walked into the office where Gray Fox and Tall Man were. And Tall Man turned sheet white. And I guess he thought I was going to kill him. I might have done something foolish like that initially, but by this time I'd kind of cooled down a little bit. And I said, "Who's getting a beer?" And he said, "I will, I will." And he went out the door. And Gray Fox looked at me and says, "Probably won't come back." I said, "Probably a damn good idea." He had some beer and that little fridge there. And we had that and waited for a ride back to Vientiane. And a caribou came in. We rode that on up to Vientiane via Udorn. And that was the end of the day. Bad day at Black Rock. But the end result in this thing, we lost 2 airplanes on the way to Ben Hui Sai, which was on the western edge of Laos, near the Burma border and Thai border, due to them flying over a road that was being built by the Chinese down out of Yunnan province to Thailand, which is now complete. But they had radar-controlled anti-aircraft weapons there, and they nailed 2 of our airplanes. The remains of one, they just got back identifiable remains. One is still MIA, Jim Acklin and Clarence Driver. Clarence Driver had been a Tuskegee Airman and as a co-pilot there, and still no definitive answer what their remains are, where they are at all. But they're no doubt in pieces in the jungle, which is sad. And another one, they brought a new dragon into Laos called Estrella. It was a heat-seeking missile. And we lost one of those over by Nakhon Phanom on the Laos side of the border. And they got nailed. And the pilot, co-pilot, and one of the loadmasters were killed. One loadmaster, wise guy, had his parachute on. So he jumped out the back. He landed in a rice paddy and struck the chute, and he saw some soldiers running towards him. He thought maybe they're coming to help. And then he started shooting. And, so he beat feet to the Mekong River, swam across, and got into Thailand. He's not in the United States somewhere. But over the last 18 months, we lost over 50% of our 123s, which is not good. I had the only crew that survived, and all of us lived throughout the thing. I've been in contact with Sampop's family for many years, and sadly, he succumbed to cancer here this year.
Oh, God. Mm.
But the end was now approaching. They're closing the base in Vientiane, Laos. We are leaving. And that gave me a bad feeling. The Hmong fighters that had been supported by us, and they supported us, are going to be abandoned in the field. That wasn't a happy thought. And as they left Laos and went down to Saigon, and some went home, I decided to resign. And in honor of the Thai kickers I was introduced to Buddhist Wat outside of Vientiane. And I became a Buddhist monk for a short period of time, which is a normal thing you do as an adult and in Asia. And it was an experience. It really was. It taught you meditation, which is a valuable thing. And uh, after a short period, I left the Wat and went down to New Zealand and began flying charters down there, agricultural stuff, and bored to hell and gone on tourist flights. And I got a call from a friend. How'd you like to come up to Cambodia? I said, oh, yeah. And fly a Convair 440. I said, sure. Never flown one of those things before, but I figured it out, I think. And went up to Singapore, picked up an old Garuda Convair 440 and flew to Phnom Penh. Well, Phnom Penh was a place that nightmares are made. It was surrounded by Khmer Rouge, the communist Cambodians. And they were bandits, really. They didn't have any compunction against killing civilians or anything else, their own people. And got to Phnom Penh, and wow, they're shelling this place. The airport, they'd blow a siren when they heard a round coming over the perimeter, and everybody hit the deck or go into a bunker and wait till it blew up. And then back to business as normal. The reason they had all these airplanes there is that the produce companies that were taking goods from village to village and selling it there couldn't use the roads anymore for their trucks. So they bought airplanes. They knew absolutely nothing about airplanes. So they bought junk. Whatever was cheap, they'd buy. Well, the Convair I brought up there lost an engine over at one of the sites in the western side of the country and left it there. Came back to Phnom Penh. I had a place in an apartment building on the 4th floor, and I could watch the firefights all night long. The Mekong River ran by Phnom Penh, and the bad guys were on the far bank, and we were on this bank. So you'd see green tracers coming our way and red tracers going their way. And every morning when they'd bring all the armor back into town, it'd come roaring down the main street and destroying the pavement with their tanks and other things. There your day'd start again. Now there again, no PXs, no medical facilities whatsoever. You ate on the local economy, and you learned real quick, don't get an iced drink. The one restaurant that was there, they kept the ice in the urinals. They chopped it and put it in your drink. Well, drink it warm. It's going to be safer. But the same way with produce. The market down there was occasionally being shelled. And there again, they'd hear a wail of a siren and everybody hit the ground. But they were chucking rounds in there, and there's women and children out there getting their food. Now, this I thought was pretty damn bad. And met Hang Nor there, who had a clinic in Phnom Penh. He's the guy in the killing fields. But got another ride flying a C-46. And this C-46 was going to be based down at Kampong Sam on the coast. Hey, that's nice. It was pretty calm down there. And got out to the airport, and they started blowing the siren while climbing in the C-46. Had a flak jacket, but you sit on the flak jacket. That was the safest thing to do because all the rounds are coming up from the bottom. But took off out of there, had passengers and all going down to the coast. And on takeoff, this damn thing shook like hell. And I thought, well, maybe it's a tire with a flat spot. Because the minute I got off the ground and reduced the power, it smoothed right out. Okay. Went down there and started flying shuttles out of Kampong Sam on the coast. This was a fun place to be. Stayed actually in a motel on the coast. Back before the conflict, Nordum Sihanouk, who was the prime minister at that time, decided he could make that like an area like Hawaii or things like that. Subdivided everything, built a nice big hotel. At that part, there's no electricity, so the elevators didn't work, and all of those things. But the motel down on the coast was nice. If you wanted to go out and take a dip in the ocean, just be careful because there was a lot of little jellyfish out there to sting the hell out of you. It was a beautiful area, and they had a nice little coffee shop or a restaurant there. And in the morning, you could get yourself coffee and a couple eggs and toast and whatever. I preferred an oyster omelet, which I think was probably an unwise thing because I ended up down with hepatitis.
Oh,
And I started losing weight. But the C-46 was keeping me fueled with money and things like that. But one of the last trips I took with it, flew up to a site north of Phnom Penh, and there was a loud bang in the back. I had a Chinese co-pilot. He looked over, he said, "Oh, cargo fall over." No, I know what the hell that sound is. And landed there and walked around the airplane. He didn't want to fool around down there in the ground too much in that site because they murdered the village elders and put their heads on fence posts around the airport for the birds to feast upon. And found a 50 caliber bullet hole right by the right engine fuel selector valve, out through the wing spar and top of the wing, through the cabin and out the other way. Well, that was the only damage I saw, which was not anything that drowned me there. So I went back down to Kampong Sam. Parked it over the side of the field and decided I'd do another walk around because there's no bad guys here and give it a good look see. And walked around it, didn't see any other holes. But when I came up to the left engine, and like most guys, you grab the propeller, and the whole damn thing was loose in the hub. That propeller blade was about to leave me, and it would either take the engine and or wing with it. So that was the end of that airplane. Next airplane I came in contact with was a Convair 440. Really a nice one, Anchor Wat Airlines. And it was a good airplane. Everything worked in it, which was really unusual. And began flying that with rice and passengers to various sites in Cambodia. And one of the last flights, it was over in Battambang, which is near the Thai border. And a friend of mine that called me to come to Cambodia was there with his airplane, the flat nose wheel type. And we're standing there talking to each other, and he says, "Oh, you look like hell." I said, "Yeah, I was down under 110 pounds at that time." And there was a 50 caliber hammering away, firing outbound. Well, if firing outbound, I got the enemy pretty damn close here now. And one of the Cambodian soldiers came up to us and said, "All American go home." "Oh, really?" I said, "We're American. We're still here." He said, "Yes, they come in with helicopters yesterday, 16, and they take our government, our generals, your embassy, and all our politicians, and they leave." That meant that they'd left these guys in the field with no resupply. They'd abandoned their own troops. And so they were cut off from everything, a way of defending themselves. Well, this is not good. I turned to my friend and he said, I told him, I'm going to go back down to Kampong Sam. It's still okay, I know. And tomorrow I'll go to Bangkok. I'll leave at noon. If you want to join me, be there by 12 o'clock or I'm gone. And he says, yeah, that's okay. I've got to go back to Phnom Penh and get my wife. I said, okay, just remember 12 o'clock is the deadline. And I went back down there and spent the night. Next morning, there was a Chinese crew there flying for Air Cambodia, and they had a DC-3 out there at the airport. And having breakfast, and I knew the co-pilot, and I told him, you know, if you want, I'm going to go to Bangkok today. If you want, you can come along. And his captain overheard it, and he says, oh, no, you long-nosed round eye, you in trouble. We Chinese, we know trouble. They know us. Okay, buddy. Well, they took off, went out to the airport before us, finished breakfast, and went out to the airport, and station manager already loaded the airplane with rice and people. And I took it out and run it up and made it backfire a couple of times. Told him, you're going to have to take this off. I'm going to have to test fly it. Well, he gave me a funny look, and I got my steward and stewardess. Stewardess was 14 years old aside and told me, why don't you go get your things at the hotel? And we're going to go to Bangkok today. And he said, oh, good idea, good idea. And he borrowed the station manager's Land Rover and whisked off to town. It's now 10:30 or so, and things are really starting to disappear out there. No more pedicabs, no more noodle stands. They know something's up. And the military there is now packing up, and they're going to go in end of day. Yeah, it's not even noon yet. And they know something's happening. So they headed on into town. Ramp just about empty. And that's not a normal thing. The hills to the north where the road come down from Phnom Penh was dirt and no dust coming up from that. So I got station manager aside and said, today we go Bangkok, you come too. And he said, no, Captain. My family in Phnom Penh. You can't argue with that. If I would have known then that 1.7 million would be murdered during the takeover by the Khmer Rouge, I might have forced him on board.
Oh, God.
But I didn't. The Land Rover came roaring back onto the ramp just a little bit before 12, like he'd been qualifying for the Indy 500. And they jumped out and said, nobody in town, we go. I said, okay, get on board. And co-pilot knew what I was doing. He was a Filipino. He really wasn't a pilot. He just bought a license, and which was okay. You know, it filled the seat anyways. But I get on board and found noon and climbed up the air stair door, and they retracted it in the side of the fuselage like an insect leg folding in. And got in the cockpit, cinched up the seatbelt real tight because if I wasn't tight, I'd come out of the seat when I tried to rotate. But, I'd lost so much weight, and looked out the window, and a station manager standing out the left front with a fire bottle. Started the right engine, temperatures and pressures came up, and looked out to the left and started cranking the left engine. It started, and temperatures and pressures coming up. As I released the brakes, he must have seen this in a movie somewhere, but he always saluted. And
wow.
I returned his salute, and there was dusty tear tracks on his cheeks.
Jeez.
His world was ending.
Mm.
His job, his future, the fate of his family. Took it out on the runway. No sense running it up. I'm going to go. Turned around at the end and poured the coal to her. Came by the ramp, about 90 knots. He's still standing there. Rotated and came off Cambodian soil for the last time.
God.
I didn't have any charts, so I headed south. I knew where the airway was, and you get climbing up to about 9,000 feet. Made a call on an emergency frequency. And Lufthansa 693 came back at me. And I relayed a flight plan and asked for frequencies for Thai center. And he was quiet. And he said, Captain Hansen, Cambodian airspace is closed. Cambodia is no more.
God.
But got a hold of Thai Center, and they gave me radar vectors and cleared me for an ILS approach for the civilian side of the field. I thought they'd send me over to the military side so they could impound me. Well, they didn't. Landed there and parked right in front of the terminal. And there was a old Convair to the right of me that stunk like hell because they'd come out of Cambodia and they still had a load of pigs and stuff on board, and they just died in the heat.
Oh, God.
But initially I thought, well, they're going to send gendarmes out here to arrest us. Nothing happened. Wow. Okay, I said, open the air stair door. And they did. Still no troops running out there. And we're all in uniform, but I didn't have any passport. I was still in Phnom Penh. Nor did I have any American money. I had a whole briefcase full of Cambodian reals, which are now worthless. But they looked good. They were green, and they had 100s in each corner. And impressive looking things, but wasn't worth anything anymore. And got everybody together. I said, just keep your mouth shut. I'll do all the talking. Walked over to the terminal. At the health check desk, they looked up and saw everybody was in uniform, waved us through. Okay. The immigration desk was empty, but over the side, they had a big glass window, and they were all sitting in there. And one of them looked up and waved me over. I thought, okay, this is not going to be pretty. Well, walked in there, and he said, Captain, manifest, please. I said, sorry, I'm all out of the paper. But I had saved an old America ID card, which you've got a picture of there. And I flashed that at him. And he gave me some blank ones in carbon. I filled it out with phony names. And he stamped it out to the terminal and into a cab. And off we went to downtown Bangkok. And I had the cab stop before we got to where I really wanted to go. And told the cab driver, how about you take them where they want to go? And all I got is 100 here. And I had folded up so just the 100 is showing. And you bring back change. And he snapped it out of my hand and they smoked off. He thought he got me. But I went over to a bar on Patpong, Max's. And there's an old watering hole that many of the Air America guys used to go to, and walked in there, and Prince Panya from the Laos royal family was in there with his Filipino accountant. And he knew me, and I'd known him in Laos. He says, hey, where you been? I said, Phnom Penh. And he said, oh, Dad. I said, yeah, but I got a Convair 440 out at the airport, and it has Lao registry. Would you like it? I figured the rest of the people are going to be dead, so I own it now. And he said, sure. He said, you bring it to Vincent? Yeah, but I don't have money for gas. And he had his accountant open his briefcase and gave me $9,000 in U.S. bills. Boy, that was a relief. And ended up going back out to the airport, paying the landing fee and gas and everything else, and still had about $1,500 in my pocket when I came off Don Muang Airport heading for Vientiane. And didn't worry about going in there without a passport because he was a royal family. And got in there and, of course, went down to the embassy and did get a passport and everything. But as they're repainting this thing in Laos airline colors, he says, you want to fly C-46 here? Sure. They had two C-46s that had been given to them from Air America. They're good airplanes. And he says, we drop rice. I said, okay, I can do that. And began dropping rice to sites that used to be enemy. And did that for a while. And also flew into the plain de jars. And I'd land up there at a site called PS20 or 22, it was, Site 22. And I'd come to a stop and they'd offload rice up there. And a little guy, major with a red star in his cap, would come up the airplane, escort me over to a tent to the side, serve me rice cakes and tea while they offloaded. And every time you'd leave, give you a little bottle of Mekong whiskey, which was good if you wanted to peel paint. But he thought we ran on whiskey, I guess. The Russians were doing the same thing with an illusion, turboprop. But I could make 3 trips to their 2 with this old pre-World War II airplane. And they had a turboprop. But their bureaucracy was just hell on wheels. They just had too many people involved in it. And they'd always glare at me when I'd come out the airplane. Not so what? But then they started putting a little guy in the jump seat in the cockpit with a red star in his cap and a pistol on his belt. Now, this is not boding well for longevity in this place. So I ended up getting some paperwork stamped and got 75% ticket discount tickets as far as Anchorage, Alaska. That's all the money I had. And bribed a border guard and crossed the Mekong in a boat and down on the train and got off there and into the terminal and through immigration and the rest of that and on the Pan Am. And they started to smoke her up and taxied out to the airplane or out to the airport runway. Lined up and he poured the coal to her and she came off Southeast Asian soil. And in the sky, there's 243 of us still there.
God.
For Anchorage, Alaska, a country that I really don't know anymore. Nor did I know what lay in the future.
Wow. That's, I mean, I like I told you, I mean, I got the book so late and literally the moment I got it and sat down, I could not put it down. And I'm hoping some of you, we've got some of the people in the chat that have read the book. And if y'all have not read Mr. Neal's book, y'all always ask me great books. And as far as Air America, I've read or starting Chris Robinson's book, but from what I already can tell, this is the standalone pivotal Air America book. If you're going to compare it to something, it's like John Plaster's SOG books. It's unrivaled in my opinion. And I was besides you starting off at such a young age, which is amazing, and people are going to find what you mentioned. People are going to find absolutely amazing the drive and the love you had for for flying airplanes and just airplanes in general. But the thing that really, besides being absolutely crazy and some of the characters, I really enjoyed you getting deep into Asia, Southeast Asian culture, and really respecting the culture between the Vietnamese you met, the Lao people you met, the Hmong, the Thais. I mean, literally every ethnicity you met, you tried as best as possible to engulf yourself in their culture. Could you speak a little bit about the Southeast Asian culture? And one thing I found that you spoke about numerous times in the book was the aspect of face in an Asian culture. Could you speak a little bit about that and your experiences with saving face or what have you?
Yes, as they looked upon us, as far as round eyes Americans or even Europeans, have no face.
Mm.
You have to develop face, and that's a process. That's just be honest, and talk to them. Don't ridicule them. And so many people will ridicule a different culture. Uh, they've got their ways, and it's worked for them for centuries, or even longer. In the case of the Asians, they've been there forever, and their culture is good. And the other thing too, the food. I wasn't afraid of the food. Hell, these people are living. I'm not afraid to eat. Uh, and there was a lot of it. Braised pigeon is one of my favorites, and Beijing duck. Oh God, there's so many of them. But the Asian way of fixing it is much different than this stuff you see here in Americanized restaurants.
I really loved speaking of guys looking down on eateries or getting food in certain establishments. You had two wild experiences between the people working in the back at the kitchens, the lepers at
Yeah,
one institute, and then politically correct hermaphrodites were taking
right.
orders. But
Mhm.
then also, I really respect you because you actually found a awesome place that was serving was it roasted pig or sucked
Yeah,
something?
suckling pig.
But it was right over
Sewage ditch.
a waistline or what have you. So I
Sewage
mean
ditch.
sewage ditch, but it was the absolute best pig you could get
That's right.
in the country, and
Mhm.
you absolutely loved it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That was one of my favorites.
I just love that, the fact that people are looking down and probably like, can you believe he's eating here? It's like, well, y'all obviously haven't tried the food because you wouldn't be saying that.
Well, you've got a lot of places down south too. Hog brains and eggs is one of my favorites down there.
Wow. I mean, so you had uh no issues, I mean,
Oh,
whatsoever. I mean, you just jumped right in and liked it right off the bat.
that's right.
That's just that's amazing because I've heard from
It
a
hasn't
few of the
killed me yet, but
I,
I'm only 87.
well, you look good and sound good, and evidently it may have actually done a little bit good for your health doing all of that. So
Right. I
uh,
think so. Exposing yourself to foreign bacteria and the rest of that helps you develop immunities. We're so insulated by having stuff so sanitary. You're not developing any immunities that way. It's and artificial foods. I just really got a problem with that. That's not doing you any good.
and I mean, really, to be honest, speaking of being in good health, I mean, other than drinking the bad water that time, I don't think you got sick. Did you get really sick your entire time in country?
No, you get some things like uh,
Bugs and
yeah, bugs, tapeworms, and things like that.
yeah. That's
Sure, an experience too.
keep that figure down. Keeps nice
Yeah.
and slim with that though. um, let's see here. Questions are going to be coming in, and I'm not gonna, since you went so great with that. going to give away too much of your book. And, maybe after some people read and you would like to join us again to go a little bit deeper into Air America, we'd love that. But let's see here. Another aspect I found very, very interesting, because again, you're our first time speaking with a fixed wing pilot. The aspect of the kickers, and Mr. Eugene or Gene being one of them, and then you had some stellar tie kickers. Could you speak a little bit about what the role of a kicker is for Air America and what they were doing?
Technically, they're called air freight specialist.
Air freight specialist.
But kicker was the common term, because in the C-46, when you were dropping rice, they got actually behind it and kicked it out the door. Each pallet of rice would be around 1,000 pounds. And so it'd take some pretty good push. And as it went out the door, the ropes tying these bags of rice onto the pallet would come off, they'd be cut, and then the bags would scatter and free fall. And you did that at 105 knots at 800 feet. And that gave it time for the air resistance to slow the forward velocity of the bags of rice. So the last 50 feet or so, it was falling vertically. And these bags of rice were not 100-kilo bags. They take a 100-kilo bag and only put 40 kilos of rice in the bag and double bag it so it didn't break. And that worked quite well. Now, that's airdrop loads with parachutes there. Those are munitions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's down in Paxe.
Okay. I think, actually, you did send me a picture, and I hope it's clear. I think I've got a few photos of the kickers in the back of your plane.
Yeah.
Apologize.
Yeah, where they're shoving the stuff out the side. That's in a C-46.
And guys, I apologize on my quality, but you can see him right here, or actually two guys. There you go, right there. And there's the rails right there.
Pallet, it's on rollers, but it still takes a little push.
Wow.
Now, in the 123, of course, for airdropping, you'd be in a nose up attitude, and there'd be a strap behind it. And when you call drop, they'd cut that strap, and that would allow it to slide out the back. But you'd help it out the back by adding powder and the jets too. That's out of a Caribou.
Oh, okay, a Caribou. Dang, that's concertina wire. Wow, y'all were dropping literally everything.
Oh yeah, they even dropped animals. Initially, they dropped animals with a parachute, but they found out that wasn't good because they used the animals as beasts of burden, so they started free falling them.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, particularly cattle. Yeah, and they knew it was coming because they'd start bellowing.
I mean, guys, can y'all imagine that? I putting it into picture form, reading it is insane, but actually seeing it done, this is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too, in the drop zones, if it was a new drop zone, there was always a danger the locals running out and trying to catch the rice or stuff. Well, this thing's doing 120 miles an hour and it weighs 80 pounds. It's going to make paste out of you. The other thing that they valued highly was the plywood pallet underneath, and it's coming down like a falling leaf. Well, it's great building material, but it'll cut you right in two if you try to catch it.
And sadly, there were a few occasions of some rigs coming loose or not, parachutes not deploying, and people literally being squashed and killed, sadly. Mm-hmm. Gosh almighty. We do have a few questions here. I was just going through some pictures. Sorry about that, guys. Mary Jo, yes, when I first learned about that, Americans in general could learn a lot from face. Absolutely. Cool Hand Luke, how much power did the J-85 add to y'all's takeoff, and how did you control them?
They were controlled by a toggle switch down in the bottom of the throttle quadrant. You got 2,500 pounds of thrust out of each one. You got 2,500 horsepower out of each reciprocating engine. Now, we did not use separate fuel. We burned 115, 145 fuel in the jets too. Now, in the tail cone of the jet, there'd be a lead oxide, yellow oxide in there. And if you wanted to get rid of vermin, just rub any bait in that lead oxide, and it's going to off them right now.
Holy moly! That when when y'all first got to that section and started seeing about that, I was like, wow, that y'all are getting some raw power out of that.
Oh yeah, yeah. It made a rocket ship out of it. Initially, we only had the recips on it, the B models, but when they came up with the K model, yeah, that made the short strips a lot more usable, and you didn't get such a good look at the trees at the end of the runway.
That is absolutely amazing. Wow. I don't. We did speak about it, but Josh was curious. Could you talk about how how Air America recruited smoke jumpers, or how they came into the picture?
Most of the ones they had were either ex-military or Smokies out of Missoula, Montana. Smoke jumpers were, of course, well versed in coming out into alien landing zones and things like that. Plus, they would drop their equipment too with them. But they were the ones that were primarily of the American group. Now, the Lao and Thai loadmasters, they'd learned in the field, and they were damn good.
Wow. There's and I can't for the life of me remember Paul Carter or someone has a great Laos YouTube page that just did a special on the smoke jumpers and speaking about their work with Air America. And guys, if I can find it, I will post it in the link to where y'all can watch that. That's a great both on the jumpers and the Air America men they worked with. So
Paul Carter came and interviewed me, and we did a film in the EAA museum. He's currently in Cambodia filming additional for this thing. It'll be released sometime this month, I believe. He'll have that on the one that I did for him.
That's wonderful. He again, guys, he does great, and we confirmed it is Dr. And I think his actual YouTube page name is Dr. Paul Carter, and
right,
it is amazing. Absolutely,
he got his PhD from university in Thailand.
Holy moly!
He lives up in, near Chiang Mai, and that's a nice area. A lot of expats up there.
Okay, then that I was wondering how he got so versed and well informed and a PhD and living amongst the expats. You'll definitely learn.
Well, he lives a lot with the locals too, and that's where you're going to learn something about what's happening there. If you immerse yourself in the American community, you're not going to learn a damn thing. Well, you will learn
except
something.
Their side of things, so to
their
speak.
side of it and their culture is unique, and it's very rich, and it's something that people don't do. And I don't understand why. I always did. I just jumped right in with both feet, and hey, you guys are living a different way than I am. I kind of like to find out what it is.
And that's kind of, we'll get into that after this question, but that's another reason why you people started kind of thinking you were a little weird and maybe have gone off your rocker, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I always like when they think guys have gone native, and it's like, no, we're just getting into the culture and not avoiding it like some of you guys are.
Well, if you want to survive, you better get into it.
Absolutely.
You're in their spot.
Absolutely. Jason, great question, because I was actually going to wonder about this myself. We had H-34 pilot Bill Collier on from Air America, and he was explaining the pay rate, and man, was it steep. He says, can you break down how you were getting paid and maybe some of the other days you made more than others, making more money on some days than you did on others?
Yes. Initially, we didn't make all that much money. Mm-hmm. When I went over, it was $700 and some odd for a co-pilot per month, and $1,050 for a captain. It went up over the time, but we never were at the rate that the commercial airlines were at. We're well below that. Hazard pay was your only additional, and initially a co-pilot got $5 an hour being shot at, and the captain got 10. Kind of unfair. So you made really all your turns to the right. Right. So the bullet had to come through him before it got to you. And those were called $5 turns, and co-pilots did not like those. Later on, of course, the pay went up, and we were in the $20,000 a year rate, which is nothing all that great. And depending on how much hazard time you got for the extra $10 or $15 an hour as it went up, would give you a little bit better benefit. But travel-wise, we had the advantage of getting airline rates. We could get discount airfare, which was great. TWA had one deal that was really great, $144 around the world, which was great. And Lufthansa was always good to me. You get on board and they'd always put you had an discounted economy ticket, and they'd always put you first class.
I mean, you some of the places, not only you, but you sent, I mean, some of them were jokes, but I mean, some of the places y'all went, I mean, it literally was a world excursion for some of you guys. It's amazing.
That's right.
Tiger hunting in India,
Yep.
hunting and fishing in New Zealand.
That's right.
I mean, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, you get 10 days off. You could whip down to New Zealand. You're pretty much in the same time zone. You're just going south. That was great. Going across the Pacific was hard on you because of your time and date change. And America had no great allure for me. I liked other places. It just was more fun.
Absolutely, you can tell that right off the bat. And speaking of kind of getting in country, and again, we're not going to give away too much of the book for people who haven't read it yet. We'll always get you back, hopefully, to talk more. But could you kind of talk about another really funny part, another instance where they kind of think you're weird and maybe going off your rocker? Can you explain how? But it was a serious note, and it did save lives. Could you speak about breaking in new pilots?
Breaking in new pilots was a joy for me because some of these guys had never been out of the country before, or if they had been out of the country, they'd been in the military and they had mess halls and all the rest of that. Well, you're going to have to give them a dose of reality, and also in reality and how the flying is. I would make it extreme. Here now, they don't want compounded emergencies for flight checks in America. Well, that's not how real life is. Just losing an engine isn't the only bad thing that's going to happen. The engine also had generators on it, hydraulic pumps, and it also coupled into a lot of other systems. So you better be ready to deal with everything else. Landing gears, they'll fail. You got to crank. And I haven't cranked the damn thing now. It's a pain in the butt. But, learn how to do that. Not because it's in the manual and it's described. Physically do it and learn how that works. If you just have book learning and stuff like that, you're going to die. That was the other thing. Adrenaline was my drug of choice. And it was an addiction that I had. And that little squirt of adrenaline just made the world different for me. Some people, it freezes them. The co-pilot I had got shot down, it froze him.
Oh, yeah.
But me, my mind can do 1,000 things. Your body does not move any faster, but you can think of a million things that you can do to get out of this situation. And that's what I loved about the whole thing.
And some of your guys, and it's amazing the psychology you displayed in the book and really broke it down for us, because you can only imagine a lot of the people that read your book will never fly a plane, never be a co-pilot in a plane or what have you. So I mean, you go to amazing links to break it down. God, I just found another question I need to ask. But I mean, some of the guys coming in, they weren't cherries, so to speak. Like you said, some of the guys had flown in Vietnam, but you quickly break that down and say Vietnam is a totally different world compared to flying in Laos. That's I mean, totally different. And then you've got Mr. Roger, who we're gonna end up bringing up late in a bit. The wild child John Martin. And then I was surprised to see which usually comes up asking about some of the older guys, but Mr. Cliff Wilson, who was a WW2 fighter pilot, ace.
That's right.
I mean, so these guys weren't cherries, so to speak. I mean,
that's right.
And you really pick out some of the guys. I think maybe Tom Harper. I think he's sitting in the back, which you had been told early on, never sit in the back. You always take papers with both hands, and you quickly eagle-eyed that right off the bat.
Well, I wanted to find out what the culture was like, and I was lucky enough to run across a gal that was willing to talk to me and tell me what the protocol is. Everybody's got different manners where they approach things, and particularly officials. The Chinese have got a great thing about face and procedures and showing respect, and just little things. We sometimes just say, "Oh my, that's not worthwhile." Well, it is worthwhile if you want to deal with them. So I just followed their thinking. And there was a lot of history around Taipei. Some of the old graveyards were interesting. They were leftovers from World War II, and they had their history there on their tombstone. It may have been in Chinese, but get somebody to translate it for you. And, hey, it's really damn interesting how they lived. And if you're not willing to take the time to look and learn, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And that's happening today, very, very evident in our society.
It absolutely is. Absolutely is. And I had a photo. Let's see if this.
Oh, yeah, that's the old cat building.
Okay.
Down in Shungshan Road in Taipei.
I was hoping that was the correct place, and was hoping that was what I was thinking it was. I need to send you that video of these Air America. It's got tons of photos, and there was before we kind of ask about some of the characters, and then maybe a few more of the viewer questions, because we're coming up on 2 hours, and I don't want to have you too long. Let's see. Before we get to Mr. Gene and them, I've recently learned, and I'm surprised it's taken this long, but from the SOG gentlemen, they had Filipino armorers, mechanics, and I'm just recently learning how many skilled Filipino doctors, engineers, whatever you'd like to say, the cream of the crop from the Philippines, as well as some Chinese. But you guys had amazing Filipino and Chinese mechanics. Could you speak a little bit and tell us and inform us a little bit about the significant role the Chinese and the Filipino had in helping you guys?
Well, Air Asia, there in Tainan, they had 9,000 employees there. Most of these guys had airline frame and power plant FAA licenses. And if they had an A&P license from America, they'd make 75 cents a day. Now, if they had an inspector certificate, an AI, airframe inspector, they'd get $1.25. Which I'm sure the pay has gone up quite a bit. But it was a huge compound. It was an Iran facility for the Air Force. They inspect and repair as necessary is what Iran stands for. And they do that for fighters and other aircraft in the Air Force in inventory. And of course, the rates were much better than bringing them back to America or someplace else where you're going to have unionized labor. And Thailand was amazing. Had great big 10-foot high sheet metal doors going into the place. You taxi and they close them behind you. And it was kind of secretive.
Wow. And yeah, speaking of high walls, one of the more funny stories in the book, you guys getting into trouble with y'all's M80s
Oh
and
yeah,
kind
that
of
was
getting.
the Chinese embassy. But
I
the embassies worldwide they're pretty well standard. Whenever in danger and doubt, run in little circles and scream and shout, and they all do that.
I still get a kick out of it and just have to think and try and picture there that young pilot is with his wife and they're showering and all of
Oh
a
yeah,
sudden just guns galore pulled down
yeah,
on you
they're
while
both
you're.
naked in the shower, and they thought they were the ones doing that. Oh, it was Gene and I.
And the poor guy, they found the pistol, and sadly he was
Oh,
had to go down for a little while, but he got out, which was
oh
okay.
yeah.
God Almighty, I can only imagine the fear on in his mind, and that first thought of, oh God, I'm naked with my wife, and they've got guns on me.
That's right.
There was, let's see here. Well, while I'm looking for another question before we get to the viewers, because there's some ones popping in. Could you speak a little bit about some of the characters, especially Mr. Gene and Mr. Roger? Because there's
Now,
a lot of characters you come across.
Roger was a real character. I gave him a hard time initially, but he proved out to be a hell of a good pilot and able to cope with the various uh, problems that were available. I remember one of the last times I saw Roger in Saigon. Uh, we had two bathrooms on the second floor of this building, and they were one holers. And the men's bathroom never had any water to flush it, so it would become filled with liquid feces. And then they'd invade the women's bathroom and use that, including their bidet. Well, Roger was in line and he couldn't hold it. So he voided explosively and squished down the floor, down the stairs into the ramp and took off his pants and hosed himself off. And I asked him, I can bring you out as standby pilot if you want to go home. Yeah, oh no, I'll go. And he squished off to go fly the C-46. He was a damn good pilot. I really liked Roger
But
because he was a can-do guy.
but wasn't Roger also? I hope it isn't, but it seems like I think I remember. Wasn't he sadly the guy that was flying that day and had to go to the bathroom bad? I think he had a stomach issue. Come
Uh,
to find out, he didn't think there was toilet paper,
no,
so he.
that was another guy,
Oh God.
Deacon, John Deacon.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
another one, and the whole aircraft's full of toilet paper.
that's right.
Oh my God, you guys! I'm telling you, it's half. There's it's a very very serious book, guys. But half of it is grown man, military, CIA, Animal House antics. It is
Oh, yeah.
unlike anything I've ever read before, and that's saying something because we've got a mini library here of Vietnam books. It is just crazy. um let's see here. I really want to save some of the wilder stories for the guys that read the books, because if we really got into some of them, we'd be here 3 hours. Let's see. You had spoken about getting to eat some of the dog and having some
Mm,
good cognac. You had spoken about being shot down 3 times in one day, and being rescued. And as a matter of fact, the man that rescued or pulled you into the aircraft that time was a Filipino mechanic.
that's right.
Uh,
Most of the helicopters had Filipino mechanics.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. Well, while I'm looking, let's hit some of these questions right here by the viewers. I apologize, guys. Um, Cool Hand Luke is wondering, what was the last airplane you flew?
Over there, the 123 or the Convair 440 out of Cambodia. But then back here in the States, came back to Anchorage, Alaska, and I was flying C-46s out of Fairbanks. For Fairbanks Air out of Anchorage. And that was a dead end thing too. But then I went down to Florida. I got tired of the cold and drove the 1,500 miles of dirt road down to through Canada and into the United States, and ended up down in Port Charlotte, Florida. Did a bit of charter flying down there, flight instructing, and then I got a job with a construction company flying their airplane and landing right behind bulldozers building I-75 and airdropping their payroll to them and stuff like that. And then occasionally we go down to the Cayman Islands so they could hide their money in the banks down there, which are kind of Swiss type things.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was wild. And even I took a C-46 down to Guyana and was flying down there. And that was an experience. We'd fly out of Georgetown into Lethbridge in the interior of Guyana, right on one of the tributaries to the Amazon River. And there was a slaughterhouse there, and pick up raw beef. That whole area had been developed by John Chisholm, who initially came down there and organized a cattle drive from Lethbridge to Georgetown. I don't know how many there was in the initial drive, but through the rivers and the alligators and everything else, they lost about 3,000 head, but they thought it was a great success.
Wow, good Lord. Now, Guyana, what was this around the time of? Well, no, this was way back. I'm supposing, but Guyana, the same place that the massacre.
Flew lumber into that place. He wasn't there yet. He was still organizing his group to come down to Georgetown and doing that wonderful Jonestown.
Yes, sir. Jonestown. Yeah, Jim Jones. Wow.
Yeah. Which I don't know. The people are easily swayed in many ways, particularly if you put a religious connotation to it.
Oh yeah.
The Branch Davidians, the ones that thought they were going to get picked up with a flying saucer and all the rest of that stuff.
I can't remember. Oh, Heaven's Gate. Thank you.
Heaven's Gate.
I was going to kill me if I couldn't remember that.
It was. It's a faith is a wonderful thing, but it can be
abused and used by bad men doing bad things,
or guys that eat too much of their own popcorn.
True that. True that. Let's see. Hey, I'm going to save that one for my last question because that's I had forgotten to bring that up. Dan is curious. Is this by chance the Captain Hansen that was referred to as Weird Neil Hansen in the Ravens book?
Yes. Yeah, that was Christopher Robin's book. Mm-hmm. He enhanced that character there with cowboy boots and a Stetson, but that was his thing. He was selling books.
Oh wow, Dan's godfather was a Raven. He said he enjoyed the book.
Good.
Very cool. Oh yeah, Mary, I need to get back up to yours up there about asking about meditation. But Jake B was curious, have you ever crossed paths or do you remember a name of a vet named Stephen L. Bennett who was with Project 404 at L39 in Savannah?
Yeah. The kitty. No, I don't know Bennett, unless he went to the customer there was called Church Bell. I don't know if that was Bennett or not. They went by code names instead of their real names.
I believe he was with the 20th TAS. I think he was a pilot for a while. I don't know if he may have gotten into the Raven program or not. So I'm not sure. He'll update us again. I always mess up. I apologize for that.
Yeah, Lima Site 39 is Savannah Cat.
Okay.
And
we
guys, had a hospital there too.
I was very glad that you finally broke down in the book Lima sites, the L, the V, the T. When you're in PAC-SAY or what have you, the PS sites. I was very glad to see you break down all of that because I was still wondering in all my research. Guys, he breaks down a lot of stuff that you've seen or heard either in podcast here or elsewhere that you may not know what's going on or what it means and just take it for granted. Mr. Neal breaks it down very, very well. I know I'm plugging the bejesus out of it, but it has honestly become one of my new favorite books, and I can't recommend it enough for you guys. This is a very interesting concerning Southeast Asian culture. Mary Jo is curious. She said she loves your book. What is your opinion on making non-denominational meditation an integral part of training soldiers, pilots, etc., for one war across all time, the battlefield of the human mind?
Yes, meditation is a very valuable tool, and it's used by almost all religions throughout history. Catholicism uses it. Many people do, and of course the Zen people do that. But it's a thing that you really need to develop. You've got to do a little bit of hypnosis on yourself, and to get into that zone. And initially, you've got to do it in a quiet area. It can be misused. People can lead you down the wrong path, and that's how you get people to go out there and commit suicide too. There was a lot of that done too. We're in various places. That's wrong, but like all tools of the mind, there's dangers involved, and you need a good coach on that thing that's not going to lead you down the wrong path. It was done in Vietnam, where Buddhists would sit there and pour a can of gas over themselves and light a match, and they put themselves into a state where they could do that, and the pain was not there. You can take pain away. It's an amazing process, but it's also a dangerous process if it's unsupervised or misused by somebody that's leading you down a path.
I couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. Wow. Fran Kierkegaard, that is his godfather. I just posted about him today, which is very strange. I would love to, if he's still around, God, I'd love to hear from him. Very good question, Galil. I was hoping this would come up because I was actually about to ask something similar. In your opinion, what was the spookiest mission that you flew for the spooks, meaning AA?
I think probably one of the craziest ones was when I picked up a guy up in Battambang, or not Battambang, but Central Highlands in Vietnam. Flew him over to Nha Trang, which was controlled by a case officer by the name of Hatcher James. And he had a family there that was giving a refugee, an orphan there, to an adoption agency that was going to go to Raymond Burr, or Ironsides at the time. And I flew them down to this agent and dropped him off at a strip in the middle of the night down the coast south of there. And they had to light up the strip with Jeeps. And I landed there. And they said, you're crazy because this place is not secure at night. Well, I got the guy in there and I got her out. And I often wonder what happened to that little gal when she got back to the States with and how she was greeted with Raymond Burr and that bunch, and probably had a great life. I hope.
I will look into that because I am, and that is crazy when I read that because people won't believe me, but I'm a huge Perry Mason fan. I was in the hospital for a terrible car wreck in college, and I got into Magnum PI and Perry Mason like crazy. And
Ironsides.
I just recently got into Ironsides. My mother told me not too long ago, he's got another great role where he's in a wheelchair, right? And I was like, what?
Right.
And then she's like, check out Ironsides. And I was like,
That's
oh,
right.
here goes another month and a half of my life watching Raymond Burr.
Oh, good.
And guys, I mean, there's literally so many of those stories like that where he's moving weird stuff, strange people he's not supposed to interact with, and it just turns into just crazy, crazy stuff. We've got a few more here. We're about to pass the 2-hour mark. Josh is curious, did Air America have any involvement in transporting the specially modified OH-6s that were used to sneak in and out of North Vietnam?
OH-6, that the Loach?
I believe it is.
Okay, yeah, we used one with a quiet kit to tap the phones outside Hanoi. And it doesn't seem like they used any of that information to any good end. It's a shame, really.
Wow. And I think you actually mentioned, I think it may have been Gray Fox, his area, when you actually see one of the first loaches, if I'm not mistaken. One of your
yeah, but there was a loach down there. They were doing training really with the thing, but it didn't have the quiet kit. That was a different bird, but we had a couple loaches.
Wow. What did you think about those in support of you guys? Were they pretty?
Oh yeah, they could do a pretty good sling load. They were surprisingly decent sling load. But of course, the predominance of our birds were H-34s, ex-military birds that had been given to us, and they did not have any military designation on them. We put H numbers, H-30, 34, but H5, and all kinds of different versus N numbers or serial numbers, just Hotel 54, stuff like that.
Wow. Gosh, I'm just looking through my notes and stars by all the. I'm going to let people read it. Peppermint Patty and Mumbles and Lulu's Bar. I mean, good Lord, have mercy. People are going to die laughing at some of these stories.
Peppermint Patty is back outside of Bangkok and has a rice farm.
No kidding.
Yeah, her husband died.
Oh, I hate to hear that. Gosh, what a strange but very enjoyable part of the book. I just
They were good people. They were
absolutely. That and that's one thing that I loved about you, and it comes through in the book that you're a very accepting person. You know, you could clearly see other people looking down on certain people, the lepers, Mumbles. You know, I mean, you really went out of your way to befriend everyone. Yeah, I mean, even the underdogs in the situation. It's amazing.
Right. Well, the lepers, it's not contagious, for gosh sakes.
I like when if you would share the
finger in your soup.
Absolutely, and that's not happening. I mean, come on, guys, not at all.
You know what the real name of the leprosy is?
I did not know. No, sir.
Hansen's disease.
Hansen, that's really what it's known as.
Yeah. Wow. And primarily in the Hawaii area, the Polynesian groups.
Holy cow. Wow. And that's one thing I found to be, I mean, not strange, but interesting, that how it was still very much alive and well over there during the Vietnam period.
They didn't have any medical people. When I was a kid, there was no state boards of medical. A guy would buy a black bag with a whole bunch of sugar pills in it and go around and claim he's a doctor. Go door to door. I remember the doctors coming door to door in Grand Rapids, and most surgeries were done in the doctor's office, like your tonsils and stuff like that. Then when I had mine out, they put a paper thing over my face and dripped ether into it and ripped them out.
Gosh.
Of course, you had the promise of all the ice cream you want. Oh, boy. What a fun game that was.
Yeah. Go ahead and do your worst as long as I've got the got the ice cream.
That's right.
Let's see here. We have guys. He does cross paths with some of the big names. He's got Tony Poe in the book. He's got Vang Pao. His customers, Mr. Gene Hassenfraus, who comes up later on. If y'all can remember the Iran Contra affair, Mr. Gene is sadly shot down, and some people give him a little bit of flack for not E&Eing, but that would have probably been a death sentence for him to be found out in the jungle, a white guy like that. I probably would have stayed by the plane as well, but to each his own. And that shows you how far. And actually, that's a good point. Could you elaborate or speak a little bit more about how some of the Air America guys didn't stop flying technically for the military after Vietnam? You had guys, if I remember correctly, you mentioning maybe on Eagle Claw for the Iran situation.
Yeah. That was Jim Ryan and gosh, can't think of his name. No, that's the old C-46 that I parked there. As you notice, for runway lighting, they got watering cans with a rag in the spout and kerosene inside, and they'd light those up. That'd be your runway lights.
Oh my gosh.
That's Samaki Peanuts, Fly Together Airline or Work Together Airline.
That is unbelievable. Some of the stuff in the book, honestly, if it wasn't eyewitness and you there, you doing it, you seeing other people do stuff, some of this stuff is like a Hollywood action movie, to be quite frank with you. The stuff you are pulling off.
It doesn't happen as fast as in a Hollywood action movie, but it does happen. You've got to have action every few minutes to keep the audience's attention. That's the bad part about the realities of that stuff.
There's George Bacon and Hog Daniels when they're some of the customers for Air America. I don't know if you ever cross paths with Hog or Kayak.
Yeah, Hog and Kayak. Shep Johnson was one who was up at alternate all the time, and one of the agency guys. He stayed in Thailand, in fact, after the thing. Jack Shirley.
Okay. I was surprised to see how long Pop Buell, Tony, and some of the other longtime customers that you had were in country. It's astounding.
Pop Buell was a real sweetheart. He had a farm here in the United States and been diagnosed with a heart issue and told to, take it easy. Well, he went to Laos and he did not take it easy. And he ended up working with the refugees in the Philippines where he died.
Wow. And what was the didn't y'all try to help introduce a new rice or a new
Yes, they tried to introduce actually bulgur wheat in Vietnam, but the Vietnamese thought it tasted like bull crap, and they'd throw it away in the ditches and cause floods and things like that. I like bulgur wheat. To me, that was something we used to have as a breakfast cereal as a kid. You sift out the chaff and the thing, and it was a good cream of wheat cereal, I thought, but it wasn't for them. Nook Mom added to that, which was basically Nook Mom is water of life. It's decayed fish juice.
Oof.
And it's got an odor, but it's got a lot of vitamin D and food value to it. And that on rice was really the only thing that kept them from having rickets and the rest of that sort of thing.
Wow.
Rickets is another thing that's disappeared in America. But it used to be common when I was a kid, people with rickets, bones, and the gals would be bow-legged and the rest of that, and caused by rickets, particularly down south.
Holy moly! Wow. Um, let's see here. There was one part I thought I had. Nope, that was Tony Poe, George. Oh, I thought one of not to end on a well. I won't end on a sad note. I'll get you to tell one funny story of a guy that I absolutely died laughing about his misfortune, not injury wise, but monetary misfortune. But
Mhm.
sadly, y'all had, I believe, Christmas of 1971. 293 with Mr.
Yeah.
George Rains, Ron Taylor, and is it Ed Warnock? Warnock?
Uh, 293 was uh, Ritter, Townley, and uh, Weisenbach.
Okay, okay.
And they disappeared over there by the Chinese road. And that's when Sun went back to get uh, identified DNI uh, fragments, and it proved it was his dad. And he was up here at AirVenture. In fact, we had a little meeting, and he found his dad's wings and emailed me the picture of those, and I identified those.
It was a bit heartbreaking because didn't Mr. George's daughter end up getting hooked up with Bo Greitz, hoping that he could get in there for that
Yeah,
POW
that was
operation?
Roy Townley's daughter, and
Uh,
that I don't know. I can't say if that was contrived or not, but
Yeah,
it's,
I
it's
respect the heck out of Bo, but some of the stuff he did post military was yeah.
well, yeah. They should have got somebody local in there
Hmm.
that it was very familiar with the area.
Absolutely. And he was a little too loud. He
Oh
been
yeah,
making a little
he was grandstanding a little bit,
yeah
and
yeah
you can't do that in front of the officials. They're going to arrest you
oh yeah.
and
And
stop.
sadly, they did. Sadly,
Mhm.
it turned bad for him. Luckily, no one killed or injured, but they did
That's right.
have to face the law enforcement.
Yeah,
Um,
I've got a friend that's with the Children's Library Project that's building libraries in that part of Laos and in Vietnam too. And they've had an awful lot of problems too with the local officials and getting permission and paying the bakish, which is the bribes.
um, okay. We're Cool Hand Luke. We'll see about that in just a second, buddy. Uh, I don't know. We're not really talking about that right now. We kind of you can read about that in the book, Cool Hand Luke. That's post Air America stuff. I was very. You were talking about travel, and it was absolutely hilarious, Mister Clarence, who you sent on a on a trip, and he comes back and was absolutely livid with you. But
Oh
could,
yeah.
could you talk about Mister Shaky? Mr. Is it
Oh
Mac Albert
yeah. Calhoun.
Calhoun?
Yeah, Shaky was flying a DC-3 out of Phan Thiet down in the coastal area of Vietnam, south of Nha Trang, and he always sweat. And some people would always wipe themselves down with a washcloth or whatever, or their handkerchief. And he took his Rolex off, had it in his right hand, wiped his face off, and then thought he was throwing the face cloth out the window, but it was a Rolex. They never did find it.
Oh, and I love the part where you said his co-pilot's sitting there and is like, did he really just do that? And sat there and didn't say anything for a moment until he realized that, oh my God, I just threw my Rolex out the
And all
window.
the co-pilots in the Goonies there were Chinese.
Oh my God, that's
Some of them
hilarious.
were ex-Chinese Air Force, and then some of them were political appointees. We had some that we'd make them sit on their hands during takeoff because we didn't want them touching anything.
You
But
do
some,
cover some of that, and to be fair, you call out the good and you call out the bad. So
Right.
you're a fair man in that aspect. um, yeah. How about if you'd be open to it after we can get the viewers that haven't read it, maybe if they can buy your book, and if you'd be open to
Sure.
coming back in a few weeks or so, or whenever you get some free time, we'd love to have you back.
Sounds good.
Is there anything you'd like to say before we close out for the afternoon?
Come to AirVenture. You'll hear me there for sure.
I'm
And
writing that
I
down.
think Dr. Paul Carter's stuff is going to really be good, and that should be released this month. That's going to be about an hour Facebook video, but he does really in-depth research, and he plays the good game, and I like to see that. It's part of history that so many people don't know about. And hey, your tax dollars paid for this stuff. You ought to at least pay attention. And it's kind of discouraging that people are willing to pay their taxes every year and not really wonder what's happening with it.
Absolutely. And before we go, I've got to have this question answered because it is kind of strange. This is what he finds so confusing. Chinese co-pilots. Weren't we fighting the Chinese Soviet influence in Vietnam?
No, Soviet. No, Soviet. Chinese co-pilots because we were Chinese registered aircraft, and it had Chinese registration on the wings and everything else. And General Chiang Kai-shek, who was still in power in Taiwan, was very pro us. Civil Air Transport, the Convair 880 we had, was the flag carrier for the nation. It had the Republic of Chinese flag on the back. And they were good, honest people. I just really loved them. They had a political difference with Mao Zedong, the communist Chinese, just like we had differences between Yankees and rebels. No difference, really.
You do a good job of breaking that down in the book as well. When you first talk about Laos and who all's there, the graveyard of aircraft, but also who's supporting who, Khmer Rouge wise, Pathet Lao wise, and NVA wise. So,
right.
Again, everything you might have a question about, right here in this book, he answers it.
Good.
That's a great answer. I appreciate that because that was a minor bone of contention trying to figure out what in the heck are Chinese guys, but it's a Chinese company. You've got to pass a Chinese flight test. They're registered in Chinese. And yes, he said that makes sense with the Taiwanese.
Yeah.
Thank you. All righty. Well, I disrupted the flow of the end there, but if that's, I think we'll put a pin in it and save another hour or so till we can get some people to read the books, and we'll come back for another one.
Well, thank you. I look forward to it, bud.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. I've appreciated the almost 2.5 hours you've spent with us, and I'll get in touch with you guys to see about setting one up here in the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you. Get a hold of Luan. She does all my bookings.
Yes, sir. I'll reach out to her, and I hope you have a wonderful day, sir.
Thank you.
All right.